Hello, everyone. This is the first lecture video on the chapter on young adulthood. Sometimes it's called Adolescence, but this is the period between adolescence, which was our last topic, right? And adolescence is thought to go up to about age 21, 24, 25, early mid 20s, until middle adulthood. So that's pretty much most traditional college students fall under this period of emerging and young adulthood. Middle adulthood, that's where I fall, and that will be the next chapter. So middle adulthood is thought to be around 40. So we're talking about the period between adolescence, which was your puberty and early 20s, until your 40s, right? So that would be college age. And this is kind of a fun topic. I often enjoy the conversations that we have when we get to this chapter, because it is a time that where our culture tells us is supposed to be this wonderful period where lots of really cool things happen, but at the same time, it can be very stressful. So it's kind of an interesting conversation to have with a group of college age people and talk about, is it so wonderful or is it stressful? And traditionally I get a group that'll say, yeah, this is really stressful. And part of the reason this is stressful, it's not your imagination, but it's because this is that period of launch. And if you watch the movies, or if you what our culture tells us is it's just fun and games, and it can be, we've even given it a word, and some people make fun of that. We call it adulting, but adulting can be a lot of work, and it can be a challenge, especially if you haven't had a whole ton of adult responsibilities up till that point. So it's a period of change, and some of the things that influence that change or influence the stress associated with that period are what are the social and the cultural expectations, how much money you have. So, I mean, it's easier to quote unquote adult if you have plenty of resources. It's harder if there's fewer jobs. It's probably pretty challenging right now with a lot of people losing their jobs to be adulting for maybe the first time. What are your parental expectations, or what did your parents tell you? Sometimes I tell the story about I went away to college and very quickly changed my mind and came home, and my dad met me at the door. I gave up a scholarship, and my dad met me at the door and told me he'd been waiting for this for 18 years. And he told me that I couldn't move out. He made very clear I couldn't move in. I had to go. I had to launch. Made very clear what the parental expectations were, and they were that I could not live in my childhood bedroom. And then they moved away, blah blah blah. Then they moved away, and that's a yeah, whole nother tangent. And then your textbook also suggests that the political climate of the time can also influence what this period is like. And I think good examples of that would be, is it a time of war? So certainly during, during the Second World War, during Vietnam, this would have not been a really joyful time in people's lives. Some of the things that you see on Facebook right now about the quarantine, where your grandparents, they were sent to war and you're sent to your couch, so you guys can do this. But it'll be interesting, I think, to see what the researchers, what the historians, what the developmental scholars tell us 20 years from now or 10 years from now about the 20-year-olds and the college freshmen. And I think about my daughter. She's 19. She's going to be a junior next year, and things have really shooken up. So that can add to the stress of this period of this time in your life, right? This is also a period where people are basically at their peak. They're at their physical peak. They are most resilient to sickness right now. And I was read an article yesterday about young people being, this what you see in the media is about how young people are they're not catching the COVID-19, and they're quite resilient. They're carrying the virus, but they're not symptomatic. And that's part of your human development, is this is a period in your life where you are at your peak. 24, 25, learning is the easiest. I think back to that when I was in graduate school at 24, 25, I could whip out a 15 page paper in a weekend. I struggle now with writing, a one-page essay or a one-page letter. So you're really at your intellectual peak. You're at your physical peak. Um, this is a good time, healthy, physically, psychologically. And then there's a fancy word for it, sentience. And this is the natural decline that's associated with aging. But this age, the stage in the life course, your things are good. This is also the period, what according to your textbook, it says up until about age 35, where, what's it say? Until you get to 35, it says illness. After that, illness will be your primary cause of death. But for now, this stage, it's accidents. And if you remember with adolescence, it was motor vehicle accidents. So you're less likely to die during this period, of course, unless we're talking about war. Okay. And then there's a brief discussion about the definition of obesity and how we have more fat people in the United States than we have any other place in the world. But I want to get back to this notion about how this is a stressful time. So there's a fairly extensive discussion in your chapter about stress. And if you're in the psych class, that was just the last chapter that we covered in the psych. But a couple things I want to highlight when we talk about, so psychologists like to focus on, or like to study the phenomena of stress from what they call the neuroimmunology. And what that refers to is the relationship between your immune response, your psychological makeup, or the way you're dealing psychologically, and yeah, the study of the relationship between your brain, your psychology, and your physical well-being. And as we have, I hope, established in other chapters, there is a relationship between how your mental health and your physical health, and how we deal with stress. So it is important to consider our ability to manage stress, because that's intimately tied to our physical well-being and how we respond to physical threats like viruses and bacteria, these kinds of things in our natural environment. So there's a discussion here about what is the definition of stress. I particularly like the idea that stress is defined as environmental demands that one perceives to be threatening. In other words, when there are things outside of ourselves that require our emotional or our physical energies, our cognitive energies, those are all stress. And stress can be quote unquote good stress or bad stress. So a good stress might be a new job or a new apartment. A bad stress might be you lose job, but both of those are stress because both of them require you to use your cognitive, your thought resources, your physical resources to move your stuff, or your emotional resources, right? So stressors are all of these things that require your energies. And acute stressors would be things that are sort of short term, like you have 3 exams in the same week, like you have to learn how to use Canvas or Moodle in order to do your homework. Those would be acute stressors. And then chronic stressors are those things that continue, right? The things that happen over time. Your book doesn't necessarily talk about it, but in our psychology textbook, we talk about the difference between, say, acute stressors versus what's called daily hassles. And those are the little things that just build up and accumulate, right? So when we think about stress, because this is a time where you are graduating from high school, deciding on a college, deciding on a major, maybe having roommates for the first time, maybe moving to another town, maybe getting a job for the first, like you're graduating from college. There's a lot that happens in this fairly short period of your life. You may be deciding on a life partner, you may, having a child. All of these things happen in a really short period of time. And so it can be a really stressful time, just new stuff, constantly demanding your resources. So having grasp or developed a way, your own method of dealing with stress will be good for you during this time. And it can cause your body to be more susceptible to illnesses and various things. And that's what's referred to as the psychosomatic disorder. A psychosomatic disorder is um, when when you become physically ill because of stressors in the environment, right? And so maybe nausea, headaches, these kinds of things. I'm going to stop the video here, and when we come back, I want to talk about some of the coping strategies that go along with stress.